My child, stop for just a moment. Do not let your finger carry you past these words, because what is unfolding right now was never meant to miss you. Out of every voice competing for your attention today, this one found its way through. Not by accident. Not by coincidence. Something much older than chance has been quietly arranging this moment. And if your heart feels a strange pull toward these words, that pull is not random. It is recognition. Stay here. Breathe slowly. Because what you are about to hear was prepared specifically for where you are standing right now. There is someone connected to your soul who has been watching your life from a distance. Not casually. Not occasionally. Consistently. Quietly. With an intensity they have never admitted to anyone around them. While you moved through your days, while you smiled in rooms they were not in, while you carried questions they were the answer to, they watched. They noticed. They felt every shift in your energy even from far away. And for a long time, they convinced themselves that watching was enough. That distance was wisdom. That silence was protection. But something has changed. Something has broken through every wall they carefully constructed. And they can no longer remain silent. Do not skip ahead in your thoughts. Remain here. Because the story of why they watched and why they are now unable to stay quiet is not simple. It did not happen overnight. It grew slowly, the way truth always grows, quietly beneath the surface, invisible to everyone until the moment it becomes impossible to contain. Your soulmate did not choose distance because they stopped caring. That is the misunderstanding heaven wants to correct first. They chose distance because caring too deeply frightened them. You awakened something inside them they had spent years learning to keep still. Something about the way you moved through the world, the way you spoke, the way you listened, the way you noticed things others overlooked, reached a place in them that no one else had ever reached. And instead of stepping toward it, they stepped back. Because stepping toward it meant becoming vulnerable in ways they had never allowed themselves to be. Stay with this message. Something greater is approaching. They told themselves it was timing. They told themselves the circumstances were too complicated. They told themselves that you deserved someone more prepared, more available, more certain. Every excuse sounded reasonable. Every reason sounded responsible. Yet beneath every carefully constructed explanation, one truth refused to disappear. They missed you. Not in the way people miss a pleasant memory. In the way a heart misses something that once made it feel completely alive. So they watched from a distance. They noticed when you seemed joyful. They noticed when something in your energy shifted toward sadness. They noticed when you became quieter than usual. They noticed when you began to pull your own heart back from places where it had been left waiting. That last part reached them differently than anything else. Because when they felt your energy beginning to change, when they sensed that you were no longer waiting with the same ache, something inside them became restless in a way that silence could no longer quiet. Pause here for a moment. Do not rush past what is being revealed. There is something your soulmate has never confessed to anyone. During the season they spent watching your life from a distance, they compared. Not intentionally. Not cruelly. But every new conversation, every new environment, Every new person who entered their world was unconsciously measured against the standard you had set simply by being yourself. And nothing measured up. Not because others were inadequate. Because what existed between you was not ordinary connection. It was the kind of recognition that does not repeat itself. The kind that arrives once and changes everything it touches. They began to understand this slowly. Then all at once. Something big is waiting for you inside this message. Do not leave yet. There was a specific moment when everything shifted. It did not announce itself dramatically. It arrived the way most life-changing moments arrive, quietly, disguised as an ordinary day. Your soulmate was moving through a familiar routine when something stopped them completely. Perhaps it was a phrase someone spoke. Perhaps it was a place that carried your memory. Perhaps it was a song that arrived at precisely the wrong moment to be ignored. Whatever the form, the effect was the same. Every wall they had built around their feelings developed a crack so wide that no amount of distraction could seal it again. They stood still. For how long, they could not say. Time moved differently in that moment. Because suddenly they were not thinking about reasons to stay away. They were thinking about everything they had never said. Every honest word they had swallowed. Every moment they had chosen silence over truth. Every time your name had risen in their heart and they had pushed it back down because vulnerability felt too dangerous. In that stillness, something broke open. Stay close to these words. There is another layer that changes everything. After that moment, watching from a distance was no longer peaceful. It became painful. Every update they noticed about your life no longer felt like quiet observation. It felt like witnessing a story they should have been part of. Every sign that you were healing, growing, moving forward with grace carried a new kind of ache. Not because they wanted you to remain stuck. Because they realized that while you were building your life with courage, they had been standing at the edge of theirs, afraid to step forward. That realization did not arrive gently. They asked themselves a question they had been avoiding for a very long time. If your path continued beautifully without them in it, would they be at peace? The answer arrived before they could shape it. No. Not peace. Not relief. Something that felt uncomfortably close to loss. And when your heart answers that honestly, when it speaks before the mind can intervene, there is no longer anywhere to hide. Do not skip this moment. Something extraordinary is unfolding. Your soulmate began to see the distance differently. What they had called wisdom now looked like fear with a more acceptable name. What they had called protection now looked like avoidance wearing the appearance of care. What they had called giving you space now looked like choosing their own comfort over your clarity. These were not easy realizations. They sat with each one in private. They wrestled with each one in the quiet hours when honesty is loudest. And during that season of wrestling, something else happened. Someone close to them noticed the change. They noticed your soulmate returning to old memories. They noticed the way a certain name could shift the entire atmosphere of a conversation. They noticed hesitation where there had once been certainty. Eventually they asked a direct question. One your soulmate could not deflect. Do you still think about them? The answer came without permission. Always. That single word changed the entire direction of what followed. Stay until the end. The greatest revelation has not arrived yet. The person who heard that answer did not offer empty comfort. They did not validate the silence or excuse the distance. They said something that reached deeper than any elaborate advice could have reached. They said, then the distance was never about them. It was always about you. Your soulmate heard those words and felt the ground shift beneath everything they believed they understood about why they had stayed away. Because they were right. The distance was never truly about circumstances. It was never truly about timing. It was about the terrifying reality that loving you completely would require becoming completely honest. About old wounds they had not finished healing. About patterns they had not finished recognizing. About the version of themselves they were afraid you would eventually see and find insufficient. They had protected you from those parts of themselves by staying away. But they had also protected themselves from the possibility of being known and still chosen. Do not move away yet. There is something even deeper beneath this. After that conversation, your soulmate made a decision. Not an announcement. Not a dramatic gesture. A quiet, private, internal decision that no one witnessed except heaven. They decided that the silence had lasted long enough. Not because the fear had disappeared. Because they finally understood that waiting for fear to disappear before choosing honesty means the honest moment never arrives. Courage is not the absence of fear. It is the decision that something matters more than the fear. You matter more than the fear. They began preparing. Not perfectly. Not with a polished speech or a carefully constructed message. They began the way most honest beginnings happen, awkwardly, imperfectly, with a racing heart and a sentence that felt too small to carry everything behind it. They opened a blank space. They started typing. They stopped. They erased. They started again. Something huge is waiting for you because what they are preparing to say is not merely an expression of feeling. It is an account. It is an explanation of where they went, what they discovered there, and why they are choosing to return with honesty instead of pretending the distance never happened. They know an apology is necessary. They are not approaching this with the expectation that emotion alone will be enough. They understand that your heart kept records even when your mouth remained quiet. They understand that their silence had a sound, and that sound may have reached you as rejection even when rejection was the furthest thing from their truth. That understanding has humbled them in ways they did not expect. Pause here. Because what comes next is the part they are most afraid of. They do not know how you will receive them. They have imagined every possible response. They have imagined your warmth and your caution and your silence and your questions. They have imagined you being moved and they have imagined you being unmoved. Every version of the conversation has passed through their mind. And in every version, the fear is the same. That too much time has passed. That the version of you who once held space for them has been replaced by a version who has wisely decided to stop. But then something happened that made waiting one more day feel impossible. They learned that your life is moving. Not away from anything broken. Toward something beautiful. They saw evidence that you are becoming someone who has stopped measuring your worth by someone else's willingness to choose you. They saw evidence that your peace is no longer dependent on the resolution of old questions. They saw evidence that you are not waiting anymore. And that evidence broke something loose inside them that no amount of comfortable silence could repair. Stay until the very end. There is one final truth that has not yet been revealed. Because the most important thing your soulmate has been watching from a distance is not your smile. It is not your joy. It is not even your healing. The most important thing they have been watching is the way you handle being left in uncertainty with dignity. The way you chose to grow instead of collapse. The way you refused to become bitter when bitterness would have been understandable. The way you continued to love the world even when someone important to you had not yet learned to love you properly. That is what broke them open completely. Not your sadness. Your strength. They realized that the person they had been watching from a distance had already become someone who deserved far more than watching. Someone who deserved to be chosen openly, consistently, and without conditions. Someone who deserved honesty even when honesty arrived late. Someone whose heart deserved to finally receive the words that had been forming for far too long. Do not look away now. Your soulmate is no longer comfortable in the silence. The distance that once felt like safety now feels like the greatest risk they have ever taken, the risk of losing you permanently to the peace you are building without them. They are preparing to speak. Not because the moment is perfect. Because they have finally understood that waiting for the perfect moment means allowing the most important moments to pass. They have one confession they have never made to anyone. A truth they have circled around in every private thought but never allowed to reach the surface completely. It is not a complicated truth. It is actually the simplest thing they have ever felt. But simple truths are often the most difficult to speak because they carry the most weight. They love you. Not the idea of you. Not the memory of who you were. You. The version of you that kept growing even when they were not there to witness it. The version of you that chose peace over bitterness. The version of you that made distance look like wisdom even when it was only pain quietly healing itself. That is the confession that has been living behind every moment of silence. That is the truth that has made continued distance impossible. That is why they can no longer watch from far away without speaking. My beloved child, remember this carefully. Heaven has not allowed every quiet season in your life to go unwitnessed. Every night you carried questions without answers, every morning you chose to begin again without certainty, every moment you extended grace to someone who had not yet earned it, all of it was seen. All of it was held. None of it was wasted. The silence is ending. Not because everything has already been resolved. Because something has finally begun. Your soulmate is stepping out of the distance they hid behind. They are stepping toward honesty. They are stepping toward you. And before they arrive, Heaven wanted your heart to be prepared. Not anxious. Not fearful. Not desperate for an outcome. Prepared. Rooted in the truth of who you have become. Because the conversation that is approaching deserves to be received by someone who knows their own worth. And you, my child, have never been more ready than you are in this exact moment. The silence is about to speak. And what it says will change everything.